Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's me, Robert Phoenix. I'm back, and I really apologize for being late tonight. I was going to run the show through StreamYard, and the good thing about StreamYard is it lets everybody know I'm going to have a show. But I kept struggling with this graphic, and it wasn't fitting into StreamYard's specs for the graphic, for lack of a better term. So every time I would go to change the graphic, I would lose everything I had inputted previously to StreamYard, which was a pain in the ass, to be honest with you. So eventually I just decided to ditch StreamYard tonight because it was already past the time where I could notify people. And I was getting behind on my other programming as well. It's just weird. Just a weird kind of Mercury retrograde fuck up, for lack of a better term. But we're here now, and thanks for being here. I am going to go over to Twitter, and Facebook, and let people know that we are streaming, because that will be helpful. Some people, oh, I didn't know you were streaming. Oh, I wish I could have been there for live. And I know why, right? You get to interact with one of the coolest chats on the internet. So let me do this. Let me take a swig of my my water. I'm making a transition into the carnivore diet. I don't know. I don't know what I want to do right now. Kill a live animal with my bare hands, or just rape, pillage, and plunder a 7-Eleven for all of their carbohydrates. I'm not sure where I'm at with it right now. I'm kind of in between. I think I'm in that weird phase, right? I'm in that weird phase, where it's like I'm gonna go on a Twinkie binge, or you'll find me down by the river over here, right, with I don't know, deer's blood coming out of my mouth or something. No, it's not that bad. It's actually been pretty good. I'm trying it for a couple of weeks just to see if I have some change. What's really interesting and amazing here, I can talk and go to YouTube and do this at the same time. What's really amazing is I got to keep that. I definitely got to keep that. Is how many YouTube channels there are that are dedicated to like pure carnivore diets and food. It's really, really interesting. And the level of expertise, I'm just blown away. I'm just blown away by YouTube in general at times. I really feel like it's I'm not blown away by the politics. I'm not blown away by the censorship. I'm not blown away by any of that. But I am blown away by the fact that anybody with a camera or a couple of cameras and some computer skills and something interesting to say can have a platform. It is so fucking revolutionary. You have no idea. For you kids, and not so kids, but young people. These are like, let's say you grew up in the time of cable TV, and you had people like Freeman and Alex Jones and any number of other people that were doing public access cable. Like that was like the first step, and that's what was available for people, right? It was like the whole public access thing, and that was sort of the first version of that, of this, right? Of this. Hey, I just need about 75, 80 people to get me over the 12,000. Get me over the 12,000 subscriber mark. So this would be a great night. If you haven't subscribed, please hit subscribe, because I actually get people unsubscribed. That's what happens. So if you could just do a little subscribe there, that'd be awesome. All right, let me put this on Twitter, and I'll do it on Facebook. All right, hold on a sec. I got to keep talking because dead air is never a good thing. Even in in a visual medium, it depends on what you're showing. I mean, there could be some cool things with a visual medium. But let me do this over on Facebook as well. I used to post on Facebook a lot more than I currently do. And sometimes I feel I neglect Facebook. So for all you people over there on Facebook, my apologies. I'm sure you're getting on just fine without me, but I feel like I neglected a little bit. All right, here we go. All right, one more. All right, here we go. Here we are. All right, put this in there. Paste. Ooh, I don't like that image. Image sucks. You know what I can do though? I can use this other image that I did create that I was not allowed to use because the aspect ratio wasn't right. There we go. All right, let's do that. See, I got some use out of it. If you follow me on Facebook, you'll be able to see that image. It's a pretty cool image. All right, there we go. Okay, did it. So it's an amazing medium, really. I mean, we were watching this guy from, down in what they call the Valley here in Texas, and, and he's this like, kind of middle-aged Mexican dude who has an interest in Tex-Mex cooking, and he's doing videos of, queso and how to do really good refried beans. And, and you can see in the background that he's got one of those plaques from YouTube that says, I think he's probably got 100,000 subscribers or more. This is some dude. And then he started his own line of spices, I guess you could get on one of these barbecue websites. And I'll bet you that 6 years ago, this dude wasn't even contemplating it. Maybe he was contemplating. I don't know his exact history, but somewhere back in his timeline, this thing wasn't even a thought. Okay. And now all of a sudden he's got his mother in there, and he's showing people, how to make his mother's rice. I mean, this is a fucking cool medium. You have to admit, there's going to be something in here for everybody. It's almost too much, right? Like it's almost too much. Well, we're going to talk about Elon Musk tonight and his hire of Linda Yaccarino, because Elon Musk wants to take this platform on, and he wants to use Twitter to basically have an all-in-one app, which we talked about. I've been talking about this for a while, and it will not just be 245 or how many other characters there are, right? It won't be just that. It will be this and more, a lot more. I think he wants to base it on, I believe, China's app called Tencent, where they do everything inside of that. I mean, everything, including your social credit score, by the way. It's all in there. It's all in Tencent. And I think Elon wants to do this. Like he wants to basically recreate the internet through his app. You'll be able, I mean, that's it. And the whole app verse began to subvert the internet a while ago, because you used to be able to go to the websites and have websites perform certain functions, have certain forms of content, and then the apps became the platform in a lot of ways, right? So when you can see this kind of compression model taking place. It starts off with this kind of wide, unfenced vista of the internet and websites, and then eventually that kind of goes into these other areas like MySpace, Facebook, and now we have these sort of cordoned off areas where people can go and do a bunch of shit, trade photos, upload stories, whatever, right? And you guys know the historical context of that. Twitter comes along and becomes this weird little hybrid of that kind of world plus. But what Twitter really becomes is like a news feed, because everything's happening so fast, right? And people are in this kind of lightning bolt, meth fueled express of information driven by Twitter and its 240 character limit. And by the nature of Twitter alone, you can't have any real meaningful discussions about anything, right? You could kind of shout at another person for a brief period of time, or maybe if you agree with somebody, you can kind of agree, thumbs up, hit the love, retweet, right? But it's all really, really very fast. It's kind of a blip medium, so it's a little bit different, obviously, than Facebook and MySpace prior to Facebook, and even, I don't know, I'm not a big Instagram guy. It feels like Instagram just takes too much work. Like, you got to just keep fucking updating your life. I'm not really into updating my life. It's like my life is not that interesting to update, to be honest with you. In the interesting parts, I do my best to just kind of distill for this show, so I have a story or two every now and then to talk about. But and then it feels like you're almost beholden. Like, now you have to make your life interesting, and now you have to do shit in order to kind of stay constant with that feed. And doing a daily show is enough, and doing this is enough. And the Friday show, by the way, great Friday show with Ben Balderson. If you missed it, go check it out. We do talk about the luminaries. Ben brought some really great information to the table regarding elements and the luminaries. Really cool stuff. Next Sunday night, I'm going to have a really interesting guest, and I feel like I'm getting a bit of a I don't know, what do you call it? An exclusive. I'm catching the tail of a comet, I think, before somebody gets really, really well known. And I want to thank Jay from Arizona for hooking me up. And so the person I'm talking about is somebody who has decoded the Bible through astrology. So we know that's astrotheology, but there are some very specific things that she's found out about the Ark of the Covenant. So we're going to get into that next Sunday night in the first part of the show. I'm really excited about it. And so, it's always, for me, an adventure in what we discover. And I'm finding that it's really okay, right, for to bring people, and it's never not been okay, trust me on this, but it's really, if you don't bring people along now, it's not going to work, because of where we're headed with Pluto and Aquarius. Right? We have to figure out how to play in the same sandbox together. If it's right, if the context is right. If it's not right, you don't have to get in the fucking sandbox, right? Like, asking somebody from one sandbox to play with another sandbox, and their sandboxes are just very different environments and realities, and you literally say, here, you got to go over here and go play with this person, and it's like, no, it's not how it works. That's how they've modeled this idea of diversity, and it's really force feeding a type of synergy that will often wind up in a dissonant clash and not organic at all. Right? Real synergy and real diversity is organic, and real diversity takes time. It doesn't happen overnight, right? I mean, we could get into a whole, breakdown of the inversion of that word, but it takes time. Right? It takes time to get to know people. It takes time to experience the cultural differences between people, right? Like, I live here in Texas in the Hill Country, and there are Mexican families that have lived here for 2-3 generations, right? And they have enough of their own rich historical and cultural context that they still have in their lives, but they haven't sacrificed any of it to be a part of this community, right? They're really essential parts of this community. And in as much as the Germans that came here in 1850, right, they've got their thing. And, so there's this, and has been for a very long time, an ability between two cultures. And I've lived here in the Hill Country since 2018 and in Texas since 2012. I mean, I've never experienced in my time here any kind of beef or tension between these two cultures. It's just not there. It's not there, right? Why is it not there? Well, because it's taken time for the two cultures to develop side by side with each other and not really lose too much of what either one was, and still, have this kind of, fluid, almost like form of cultural diffusion that can coexist. To me, that's what it's about. But it takes time. You just can't slam, these very different elements and ingredients together and think that overnight they're just all of a sudden going to culturally enrich each other. That's not the case at all. And we're actually going to look at that tonight with the border crisis. That's part of the title of the show. And I'm going to try to break that down a little bit as well. And looking at it from maybe a bit of a different perspective. And hopefully, and I'm just kind of cracking this thing open in my head. So it's not like I've fully fleshed it out. But I think there's a bit of a there. So just kind of go with me with it. And we'll see how we can shape and mold it in real time. That's what I think. So we're going to look at also Linda Yaccarino's chart this was a request from the Sunday Night Hotline from Mishi the Doomer Boomer. Are you going to look at her? Are you going to look at her chart? But I wasn't. I mean, she was kind of on the radar, and I thought, okay, well, maybe I will take a look at her. And what I wanted to do was to look at her chart in relation to Musk's chart, the synastry or the synastry of the two charts. Yeah, and synergies in there too, hopefully. And when you put their two charts together, they're very interesting. And from an astrological perspective, I can see why he picked her. I think that there might be some other motivations involved, some of which have nothing to do with him, by the way. And then we're also going to look at tonight this. If you follow me on Twitter, I had a tweet earlier this week, and it was really very condensed. And I had this moment where I had, every now and then you do get an epiphany. It's like, yeah, I got the epiphany. So I had this epiphany about it's not even generational Pluto, because we can talk generational Pluto from Pluto in Leo, Pluto in Virgo, Pluto in Libra, all the way up to Pluto in Capricorn. Well, Pluto in Aquarius, which is where we are now. And some children actually being born under Pluto in Aquarius. How about that? Yeah, we got our first Pluto and Aquarians being born now. But this has more to do with a particular application of Pluto. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at Pluto in the three fire signs, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, and why they're important and the impact that Pluto makes, not just culturally, but I would say, for lack of a better term, planetarily. Like these Pluto transits and fire signs and the people that embody them wind up being very, very important in terms of how we evolve. And we're at the, and with Gen Z, we're in Pluto and Sag, and we reach the end of the Trinity, the holy Trinity of fire, right? Starting with Aries, going to Leo, and now we're at in some ways, the apex of that, but also when you get to Sagittarius, right? The fire is cool. It's like a cool fire. It's not like the blazing hot fire of, say, Aries, which happens, of course, during the springtime. It's the fire of the sun and growth here in the northern hemisphere. And so these three fire signs play a very distinct and significant role in terms of shaping, in a lot of ways, how the planet evolves. And we'll get into that. We'll get into all three generations tonight, and we'll look back and see who the big players were. And what else? Oh, so I've been on a bit of a, sometimes these I'm a Scorpio rising, so every now and then I go through these obsessions, right? These obsessions every now and then. And so my latest obsession, or actually re-obsession, has been Fiona Apple, who I think is, as an artist, is pretty amazing. But when you look at her body of work, starting when she was 17, 18 years old, 19 years old, putting out that first record, Tidal, which is way mature beyond its years. And then kind of following her and watching how she has evolved and some of the shit she went through. And so I decided to look at her chart, and I'm like, oh, I get it. And I found this really interesting clip on an interview, which really, to me, describes her rising sign to a T. And so I want to get into that a little bit later. And if you're a Scorpio rising, you're going to want to watch, because it is your lesson with Scorpio on the ascendant. It's pretty cool. It's actually pretty cool. Let's see. Am I leaving anything else? Well, why don't we go into Chattaria, and let's see who's here. Let's do a little bit of a name check roll call. Who do we have? Of course, there she is, the lovely and talented one. Dr. Jonas is my man, DJ MC. What's going on, Michael? The Warriors should have paid us to watch more games. That's all I have to say. Should have paid us to watch more games. Let's see, who else do we have? Guy Travelog is here. What's happening? Estevan. Peace, love, and prosperity. Beautiful. Love it. Sovereign souls. We got ourselves some good vibes right out of the gate. There's my man Steve Thor at the door. Beth Berry, double B. Beth Cummings. What's happening, Beth? Jeff Rosen video. Speaking of Jeff Rosen, I think this Friday, coming Friday, it is the return of Dr. Narco Longo. Dr. Narco Longo and the Mysteries, Florida. Yeah, we're going to have Dr. Longo back on. It's going to be a great, great show. So jump in here on Friday for the Friday Farcast. Who else do we have? Jeff, hope you're doing well, my brother. Let's see. Introspective woodworker. There's my man, Ryan. What's happening, Ryan? Shirley Losciavo. What's happening, Shirley? Happy Mother's Day. That's right. It is Mother's Day, isn't it? Janet Pomegranate. Hey, Janet. Howdy. User 13, sir. There she is. The fantastic one. CC Jones. PB. What's going on, PB? Karen McQuaid. Helena Suba. Hi, Helena. Magic Cat. That's magic with an ICK. Don't you forget it. No Limits. No Limits is Yacht Boy. Okay, No Limits. I love it. What's going on? Susie Gemini. Yeah, happy birthday, all the mothers out there. And all you mothers who aren't mothers, happy birthday to you too. Right? It's a little exclusionary in some ways. It's like, gee, I'm not a mother. This is not my day. Well, I guarantee you, if you're a female and you haven't had children, I'm betting that somewhere along the way you performed the role of a mother to somebody, something, somebody, something, somewhere, right? So don't feel left out. All you non-biological moms, happy birthday to you too. We're inclusive here. Claire is here. What's happening? There's my man T. Jordan. What's going on? Tomas Kabuki Theater. Hello, boo. Wendy Eater, the beautiful one. She's here. Queen Lisa. Hi, Queen Lisa. Good to see you. Let's see. Cows on the side of the country road, making you hungry too. I know, right? We saw some great. We saw this video this weekend. It is really a total Taurus video, and I think it was somewhere in England. And this guy has this dairy farm in England. And every year he plants this grass. So his cows can come out after being in their stalls, sheds, barn for the winter, right? And the entire town turns out to watch this thing. It's amazing. Like they have all these cars, all these people show up, and they've got food vendors. I'm sure some of it's beef. They got food vendors. All this stuff is going on just to watch this guy open the gate of his barn so that all of his cows can come running out and like get into the new grass. And the cows are delirious. I mean, they're so ecstatic, right? It's like they're free. They get to get out of their stalls, their pens, right? And not only that, but they get grass. A happy happy Mother's Day. Did I say happy birthday? Oh, happy Mother's Day. I thought I said Mother's Day. No. So if it's your birthday, well, happy birthday too. Anyway, I'm just riffing on Jeff's cow comment. But it's cool, right? It's really cool. It's not the internet. It's nothing. It's not the running of the bulls. It's the, I don't know, the jaunting of the cows. The jaunting of the cows. All right, who else we got? Peter Bayonne, what's going on, Peter? Good to see you. Let's see. Lunchbox 81, a friend of mine did the carnivore diet. She was sick for 7 weeks after starting it. Oxalate dumping. Now she can't even look at meat. It grosses her out. It's not meant for everybody. It's not meant for everybody. I have to give it 2 weeks because in 2 weeks' time I'll be in a different environment. And I might have to downshift to keto for that after that. Let's see. Sony, what's happening, Sony? Good to see you. Saw this really interesting interview with this woman from Guatemala, Sony. She was talking with what's his name? The guy who got kicked off of ABC. Oh man, his name will come to me. John Stossel. So I guess she's running for some kind of position in Guatemala. She's like this anti-communist woman. She's really bright, really, really bright. Anyway, you came up in our conversation today. Let's see. Grateful Dogs is here. What's happening, Grateful Dogs? They're unafraid of what we are going to say. Average person is so brainwashed. Yeah, there's all, we've talked about this. There's also so many prescription drugs floating around that are being prescribed. They're in our water supply, right? I mean, it's not just the fact that people are getting their information from the wrong places or getting information that is edited, truncated, vital parts of that information left out. It's also the operating systems of people, which I think are really suffering. All right, let's see. Claire, here we go. What's going on, Claire? What's happening? Let's see. Who else? Flat Earth Hippie, if you want to know the truth about California weather, you should ask me. Been studying it for 65 years. Okay, that's a long time. Long time, Flat Earth Hippie. I'm sure you know a lot about it. Maybe some other format, some other time. We can get into it. Let's see. Harry Bowie's here. What's going on, Harriet? Mary Lee. Oh, back in the hospital. Oh my God. I was ready to look at. Hi, Robert. I'm out of the hospital or I'm back home. No, it's okay. Get out fast. Get out fast. I'm glad you're listening. Send you lots of hugs. You get lots of hugs and hearts from Chattaria. That's for darn sure. Big Sky, happy Mother's Day. I kind of fucked that up, right? Happy Mother's Day. So regardless of how this day might land to you. And for all you mothers that aren't mothers, I said it before, happy Mother's Day. We're inclusive here. I've neglected FB for almost 2 years. I kind of got off Peter and sort of never really returned. I didn't delete my account. I'm still there. Let's see. Been waiting all day for this. All right, Leela, we're happy you're here. Good to see you. Let's see. I don't have any mother or grandmothers to wish anymore. Okay, if there's anybody that wants to be Jeff's mom or grandma tonight, just for the night, right? You can just kind of raise your hand and give him a virtual hug. Yeah, let's give Jeff a virtual hug. Let's see. There's an audience for everything. I know, right? It's true. Really is true. Let's see. Who else do we have? 100 subs. They didn't suppress me. I don't know. Maybe. I'm not everybody's cup of tea. But I appreciate the sentiments. I just got a spanking from Twitter. Kate Littlewolf, pay attention to names. Yes. Always pay attention to names. Let's see. I think he wants people to pay for validation. If you have not many followers, I heard. I think so. There is that. Yes, indeed. Let's see. Anyone catch Dark Journalist last night? Very Elon Grimes news. Yeah, no. Somebody sent me a link on that. I think it was Mishi. Elon Grimes. Elizabeth Light Tarot is here. What's happening? Pin Greedy. Denise Walker. Lunchbox 81. Lana Labonte. What's going on, Lana? Good to see you in here. Let's see. Who else do we have? Let me cruise through this. Yargos, is that Yargos Smith? Hello, Yargos Smith. See some new names here. It's always great. Let's see. Oh, look at that. We got a methylene blue conversation going on. Look at that. You guys are on the cutting edge with methylene blue. Steve Letro's here. What's going on, Steve? And now my internet froze. Forest Fairy Tarot. Oh, look at that. Jeff got a hug from Forest Fairy Tarot. We like that. Good deal. You're getting some hugs there, Jeff. Temporary Mothers. A good name for a band. Temporary Mothers. All right, let's talk some astrology. Okay. Why don't we start with seeing where we are on the wheel? Let's do that, shall we? Let's do that. Do we have this? Let's see. Yes, we do. We got that. And let's go in here. So again, I'm going to be doing some of this kind of on the fly because all that time I was working on my image, I was hoping to work on some other things, but then it just sucked up my image time. All right, let's do this. So we'll do kind of an abbreviated version of the astro weather, which we used to call chart of the moment. I guess we still could call that the chart of the moment. Let's go home, see where we are. Could also look at some birthdays. All right. Let me just get a quick glance at some of these birthdays. Who do we have today? Let's see, we got the 14th. Oh. Let's do a quick run through today. See what we have. Just look at some names. All right, Muhammad Ali Jr. Who else do we have? Farhan Adria. Oh, this guy. This is the guy that's the chef, right? This is the guy that created molecular gastronomy. This is the guy that Anthony Bourdain worshipped. This guy's amazing. He's fucking genius. Absolute genius. If you're into food at all, you know who this guy is. Ferran Adria. Look at that. Mercury, Venus, Gemini, just curious, right? And even when you get into stuff like molecular gastronomy, you're like breaking things down, you're recombining them. Gemini, to me, the most scientific signs are Gemini and Aquarius. Libra, I think, may have a little bit too many ethics for science, right? Always trying to balance things. But Aquarius and Mercury or Gemini Gemini's really, really, really curious, right? Gemini is willing to sort of suspend. Well, I shouldn't be I should be doing this side, or that let me see what happens if I do this side, right? That's the kind of the nature of the twins, right? And then Aquarius is just detached. Aquarius is looking down from the looking down through the microscope, right? And everything appears like, this zoomed out reality. And, below in the slide is this micro reality. And to me, that's really Aquarian in a lot of ways, right? So Aquarius is like that just from its perspective, also because it doesn't really get attached to things. So it's very scientific in that regard. So here we have, and by the way, molecular gastronomy, if you don't know the history of molecular gastronomy, it evolved out of people who were scientists, and they would get together at conventions, science conventions, and then they would cook for each other. So he's really not the Christopher Columbus of molecular gastronomy, but a lot of the principles of molecular gastronomy have been worked out by this guy. And he does, like crazy stuff, right? Like recreating an egg, but it's not an egg. It looks like an egg, but it's not an egg. There's something else going on inside. Like, this is the guy that does shit like that. And you can see with, Mercury and Venus on his descendant in Gemini, he's curious. He's very curious. He's restless. Mars in Aries, he's kind of fearless, right? He's fearless. He's going to do things. Oh my God, you don't do that to food, right? Oh my God, you don't do that to that cut of meat. He'll do it. He'll do it. And the other thing too is the sun I think, like being a cook, being a world-class chef, sun in the 12th house. It doesn't get better than that. Like, he could just be in his, his 3-star Michelin restaurant kitchen laboratory with the sun in the 12th house. And he gets to just work it out there, right? He gets to work it out. And he's probably ahead of his time with the Sun Uranus square. And I think this is a very interesting chart because he's known as a culinary trailblazer. And you'll see that with Aquarius on his midheaven, right? That's what people do that have Aquarius on the midheaven. They're sort of systems busters. And Saturn there is the master in the 9th house. So he really is the master. He's going to master these things. And I would say also that he probably had to go, and again, I don't know his life story, but you get that Neptune square, periods of doubt. Oh, you'll never make it. This won't work. And even in some ways, kind of cutting against the grain of the people that came before him. That would be a Saturn-Neptune square, especially with Neptune in the 6th house, the thing that you do every single day, which is cook for people, right? Then he has Jupiter in his 10th house in Pisces. And then that trine with Neptune really brings out the kind of the essence of creativity in the chart. Very interesting, very, very interesting chart. Fascinating. This dude is an amazing cook, totally amazing cook. And you can see it, right? He's always tinkering. You get that Mercury and Venus, the tinker action on the ascendant. Fascinating chart. I'm just looking at this from the culinary perspective. And then again, that sun in the 12th house, he found a niche, right? You find the right niche for the sun in the 12th house and you're good. That's what astrology is about. You understand what the niche is. That is a really cool chart. Spanish chef. He was head of the El Bulli restaurant in Roses on the Costa Brava and considered one of the best chefs in the world. He's often collaborated with his brother, renowned pastry chef Alberto Adria. El Bulli had 3 Michelin stars as one of the best restaurants. 3 is as far as you get with Michelin. Adria is author of several cookbooks, including A Day at El Bulli 2003, 2004, Cocinar in Casa, Cooking at Home. This guy is truly a master. All right, let's see what else we have here. Let's see. Kate Blanchett, the actress. Jack Bruce, the bass player. So Bruce was a Taurus. Eric Clapton is an Aries. I forget what Ginger Baker is. But Ginger Baker looks like a fire sign. I'm not sure if he is, but he sure looks like a fire sign. Oh, this is David Byrne's birthday. Interesting. I think tomorrow is Brian Eno's birthday, which is why those guys are always like, well, like, you know, they collaborated a lot. And Brian Eno was like the 5th member of the Talking Heads. So Byrne is I think we looked at Byrne's chart before. He's a Taurus. Bobby Darin, the late Bobby Darin. And I have this theory that he's actually Frank Sinatra's son. He's in here. Let's see who else. Emerson, the great Emerson. And that would be Ralph Emerson, not William Emerson. Let's see who else. Che Guevara. We've looked at his chart before. Che Guevara. I have this theory that Guevara, based on their charts too, that Guevara and Fidel Castro were real comrades, if you know what I'm saying. Lou Harrison, the great composer. It's his birthday. One of the fathers of minimalism. He is a Taurus. Otto Klemperer. Is that the guy who played Colonel Klink? I think that's him. He's a Taurus. Let's see who else. George Lucas, of course. We know he's a Taurus. Apple Martin. I don't know who that person is. Wim Mertens. I actually hung out with Wim Mertens one time. I didn't know Wim was a Taurus. He's a composer. A lot of composers. Double A chart. There's Wim. I hung out with Wim Mertens in Mexico. I rode in a van that was packed with a bunch of people on Halloween night out to outside of Mexico City with Wim Mertens. It was interesting. Although Wim was in the front seat. He got the front seat. I was actually hanging out in the back with David Hikes. Do you guys know David Hikes? The guy does the harmonic overtone singing. Interesting characters. Let's see, who else do we have? Anybody else? Hugh Richardson, the great guard from UCLA. Tim Roth, the actor, one of Quentin Tarantino's favorite actors. It's his birthday. And then who else? Somebody else? Anybody else? Amber Tamblyn, the witch. It's her birthday. Let's see who else. Does she have a witchy chart? Let's see if she has a witchy chart. She is a witch, by the way. And she's married to what's his name? Oh, come on. The guy with the glasses. He's really funny. I'm spacing out his name now. And the daughter of Russ Tamblyn from West Side Story. Bob Odenkirk and the other dude. She's married to the other dude. He used to be funny, David Cross. And then he got all political. And when, when funny people get political in the wrong direction, they cease being funny. I'm sorry. You could be like really super political and just keep going hard right all the time. And at some point you'll cease to be funny. Anytime you cross into ideology with comedy, you can do it for a little bit. But after a while, it just ceases. I don't care what side you're on, it just ceases to be funny. All right. So what are we looking at? We're looking at the witchy potential of her chart. Yeah, I can see it. I could see the witchy poo coming out of the eighth house, Jupiter Uranus conjunction in the house of the underworld. And we have Saturn, Pluto, this is the famous Saturn, Pluto, Neptune sextile here. Oh, this is during, this is one of the Gen X sextiles. And then the Yod, Saturn, Pluto, Neptune. We gotta yod it out. Right there. And I think Taurus Scorpio is the occult witch axis, right? You're dealing with things like herbs and mugwort and eye of newt and shit like that, right? And you theoretically throw it in a vat, which is the alchemical process, and out comes this potion, which is very scorpionic in a lot of ways, very, very scorpionic. So she kind of has it here. Kind of has it. And then the moon in Gemini, interesting. She can kind of go either way. Anyway, Amber Tamblyn. Either way, meaning she could be kind of mainstream and then, I guess, have witches circles where they're damning Trump's soul to some netherworld dimension, which was happening during Trump. That was going on. Let's see. Tomorrow, I think, is Brian Eno's birthday. Let's see what we have here. Pretty sure it's Eno's birthday. There he is, right there, Brian Eno. It's the 15th. Brian Eno. Now, I use Brian Eno's chart as an example for some people. Now, one could make a case that it has to do with the sign it's in. But it's Uranus in the third house. And I think Uranus in the third house brings with it a touch of genius, like mad genius. And Eno is kind of a genius, right? He basically was playing with synthesizers very early on, didn't know how to make any fucking music, but he made sounds. And then he eventually continued to kind of grow his relationship with electronic music. And more than electronic music, he was also a bit of an occultist as well, and had a whole system for determining kind of what to do creatively. He created a deck called Oblique Strategies, and every card in the deck had kind of a direction, a creative direction. So he and Bowie were really tight. And he and Bowie used to do stuff like that. They used to do a lot of cut up with like musical notes and words, and they got that out of the John Cage world. So, but Eno he is a genius. I mean, he's a total genius with Uranus here in the third house. And whenever you see Uranus in the third house in the chart, it's hard in some ways to wrap your arms around it, because when you deal with the outer planets, they sometimes have their way with you, right? It's not like figuring out how to express Mars, or understanding your emotional content, or how you relate with another person. Like those things, there are maps for those things. It's called everyday life, right? When you get into the outer planets, it can be a bit more challenging. It's sort of these, the ideas that these energies impress themselves upon you. And then you have to sort of deal with the burden and the gift of the gods in some ways, which are the outer planets. So I think it's really, really interesting when we deal with the outer planets. Now, in my chart, I have a Uranus-Jupiter trine. Here, he's got a Jupiter-Uranus opposition, which I'll talk about. But in my chart, I have a Jupiter-Uranus trine. And I remember when I was a kid, I'd be in the classroom and I would like have this thing pop into my head out of nowhere, and it would be this really interesting answer to something, or for like a particular occasion, I would have like this like flash of genius, but then it would go away, and it was really frustrating for me because I was like, why can't I be like this all the time? And that's kind of like the Jupiter Uranus trine. And when you're dealing with Uranus and the outer planets, that's what happens. You're dealing with these forces that you can't always control in some ways. But I think as you get older, it gets easier. Now with Eno, he has the Jupiter Uranus opposition. So with Jupiter in the ninth house, it's aspirational, right? It's like big, really big. And you can and Eno, it's interesting is that Eno is notorious for having this, like back in the day, this huge sexual appetite. And you can see he's got Mars and Leo trining Jupiter in Sagittarius. And, that is the more engine in his chart. But in terms of Jupiter in the ninth, it's like, it's expansive. He's like, yeah, give me something big. Give me, something that is got some grandeur in some ways to it, right? Like at the same time, he's got to figure out how to plug into that. And it's Uranus over here in opposition with Jupiter. So he's going to have to learn how to understand electronics. He's going to have to learn how to understand how certain programs work. And ultimately over time, he does. And you can see where David Byrne's sun is right here. So they're just like two peas in a pod to much of the consternation of the rest of the talking heads. They kind of resented it a little bit. But Eno's a really bright guy. He's got Mercury in Gemini in the second house. And the one thing about Eno, and you can see this in his chart, he talks about options. This is something that I have, when I first heard him say this, it really stuck with me. And it's in a documentary called, I believe, Oblique Strategies. It's the same name of his deck. And he talks about how he'd rather have maybe 4 or 5 really excellent options versus 20 mediocre ones. And when I heard that, I'm like, man, that makes so much sense. And a lot of what I do with astrology is kind of based on that, like understanding, the aspects, understanding the houses, understanding the planets, understanding the modalities, understanding the triplicities, understanding all the basics as much as you can. And you can layer on all these other things. And, I've seen charts where they've got like, 20 different asteroids and fixed stars and, all this eye candy on the chart. It doesn't make it better, in my opinion, right? It doesn't make it better. If you can understand the basics of astrology, but know them really well inside and out, then you can talk deeply and not in an educated fashion. You can talk deeply and expansively about the chart or about the person. And I think that there's a lot to be said for understanding those other things that could be really interesting when you look at, like, say, for instance, when we had Ben on the show on Friday, it started off with constellations and fixed sign and the fixed stars, and eventually it kind of filtered down into planets and elements. And that was interesting, right? Like when we were there and we were sort of scanning the sky and Ben was bringing this stuff in, it was like, yeah, that makes sense. And it was within the context of what we were talking about. But if you understand the basics and you understand them inside and out, then you can really, I think, address astrology comprehensively. And you can see this, it's not about astrology, but you can see this in Eno's chart. He's got Saturn and the moon and Pluto, and Saturn sits right out in front and kind of limits things a little bit. It's like, give me the best options. not the most, but give me the best. And I'll work with those and I'll explore the depth of those options. Very interesting chart in a lot of ways. And he's very headstrong. You can tell he's got a Mars square to the sun. But at the same time, there's also this sense that he can be very cooperative and work with other artists. And he's done that. And with Aries on the ascendant, he's also a bit of a trailblazer. And, you know, he's the one guy that leaves Roxy Music early on because he wanted to take a more experimental approach than Brian Ferry, who wanted to become more of a pop band. And ultimately, Ferry won out. And Brian Eno, they both got what they wanted. And Brian Eno became this really great electronic artist. And I think this whole idea of ambient music, you could even see it in his ninth house with Jupiter there. And the retrograde is like less is more, I think, with Jupiter. You know, he's slowing things down. You know, it's funny because when he was in Roxy Music, it was very, very frenetic. And when you get past the first two Eno solo records, which are beautiful, by the way, and brilliant, and he moves out into the expanse of space and, you know, music for airports, and gets into some of the fourth world stuff. Even the fourth world music you could hear in his ninth house, because the fourth world music is what comes out of the marriage of the first and the third world. I don't know what happened to the second world. I think the second world got kind of nudged out of it. But fourth world music was when he would do things like pair up with John Hassel, right? John Hassel, who is a trumpeter, and work in like, you know, African rhythms with Flash of the Spirit, or Harold Budd. And Harold Budd with Eno would look at, you know, Eastern modalities of composition. So that was this whole kind of fourth world idea, music for the fourth world that Eno had. And that's very ninth house. Like you go out to these other cultures and these other traditions and these other, you know, forms of music. And then you bring the not the astrology, but the technology into it with Uranus. It's a very interesting chart. Super, super interesting. And he's all below the line with the exception of Jupiter. You know, Jupiter, this is a classic bucket chart, and everything has to resolve itself in some sort of bigger vision, more space, more ambiance. But he's not going to go about it in a direct fashion, right? Not with, and even less being more. You know, Jupiter in Sagittarius is like, hey, let's bring it on. It's everything, right? But retrograde, it's not. It's not. His Jupiter is right about the same degree as my Jupiter. No wonder I like Brian Eno. So there you go, a little Brian Eno action. Okay, why don't we get into the chart at the moment? Let's stop. But it's cool when we look at people's charts and we can see, you know, their art, or we can see their practice in their charts. I think it's pretty cool. All right, where are we? There it is. Okay. All right. Here we are. Okay, Scorpio rising right here, right now. Well, was it? There it is, 7:37:07 p.m. Austin, Texas. And speaking of Uranus, the sun has moved beyond Uranus. We had that Sun-Uranus conjunction. You know, Linda Yaccarino, who's the new CEO of Twitter, was hired during that Sun-Uranus conjunction. So I have some thoughts about that. I'll get into her chart a little bit more. But the first thought that I had around her hiring is that I'm getting texts while I'm doing the show. Now, who do we have here? Hold on. Hold on one second. Okay, let me see if I can turn my volume off on this. Let's do that. That'll prevent any more dings. Okay, so my first thought around when she was hired, people were saying, well, why would he hire her? This guy has taken on Twitter. He's turned it into more of a semi-free speech platform, and he's pissed off a bunch of liberals. You have like PBS leaving. You have all these people that are pissed off because Elon Musk appears to be a fascist or whatever, white super. Who knows? I think those kinds of labels are ridiculous and should only be used or reserved for people that actually are those things. Because when they're not, guess what happens? It diminishes the impact of the language itself. And if everybody's a fascist, then the whole idea of fascism completely loses any kind of merit. You know, that's how I see it. Like it should be reserved for a very select few. Most people don't even know what fascism is anyway. So, but that was not my thought. My thought was is that Elon Musk, even though he theoretically owns Twitter, there are other people that are on the board of Twitter. Okay. Let's be clear about that. He doesn't run the entire operation. If you go in and look at who also has shares in Twitter, you'll find the usual suspects. You'll find BlackRock, you'll find Vanguard. More importantly, the guy who basically made the deal at the last minute so that Musk could get the shares that he needed in order to acquire Twitter, you'll find Paul Singer. These people and these entities just don't go away. They don't go away. They have vested interests in this platform. So it's not as if Elon Musk owns everything by himself, that he owns 100% of Twitter. I'm not even sure he owns 51% of Twitter. He owns more than the rest of the shareholders or the highest shareholders, but he's not Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak at the beginning of Apple. Okay. Let's just be clear about that. So there are people who want Twitter to make money. And I believe that those are the people who were engaged in the effort to hire Linda Yaccarino. Now we're going to look at her chart and Elon's chart. And I have an astrological observation as to why he hired her. But I think that that was a hire that came from outside of his maybe vision to some extent. But when you look at their charts together, I don't think he is opposed to her at all. In fact, I think based on their charts, I think he welcomes her. Right. But this all happened when the sun was conjunct Uranus. It was, ruffling everybody's feathers. She's a World Economic Forum person. She makes stupid fucking commercials about getting vaxxed up and masked up. Right. And so she's got all the qualifications for being like a world-class Karen. But she's peppy. She's a Sagittarius. So she's a peppy Karen. And she's got a track record where she's helped people make money. Keep in mind that there are also things like ESG scores. And if you think Twitter is immune to ESG scores, you're wrong, right? You're absolutely wrong. So let's say, for instance, they gave Elon Musk maybe 4 candidates to choose from that would have fit the ESG model. She might have been the best. She might have been the best. And I'm not here, by the way, to sell her. Okay. I'm just giving you what I think, what my insight is and what I think happened. And so you have a guy who's the CEO. And I'm not sure he owns that many more shares than BlackRock, Vanguard, Paul Singer, whatever, right? I think he's got the most, but not by a country mile. So he has to deal with these people. And in that world, they have to have some degree of compromise. Or else, they can basically, I mean, if they wanted to, they could probably do Paul, keep in mind, Paul Singer, who is on the board, was the guy that masterminded the takeover of Cabela's. And what he did is he bought Bass Pro Shops. And he used Bass Pro Shops as a cudgel against Cabela's. And the people that owned Cabela's were now going to go toe to toe with Paul Singer and Bass Pro Shops. And what Paul Singer did is he went into the board of Cabela's and all the shareholders and said, look, I'm going to give you an incredibly fair price on your shares. Incredibly fair price. And I'm going to incentivize you to sell Cabela's to Bass Pro Shop. And the people at Cabela's were forced with 2 options. One, they would say no, and then Paul Singer would then go after them, right? Because this is what these hedge funders do. They work their way in, they start to buy shares. He might have even had some shares in Cabela's. And then they're like worms, and they go in and they worm their way through everything, right? Until eventually they've bored through to the center of the apple, right? And then they are able to sort of take things over because they've acquired enough shares along the way, and then it's a hostile takeover. And at that point, they're going to get less money for their shares. And this is what he did. So when Cabela's did that and they said yes to Paul Singer, it completely ruined everything, right? Cabela's was a company town, a total company town. All these people had worked for Cabela's for years. Their company headquarters, where was it? I think it was in Kansas or Iowa or someplace like that. And as soon as Paul Singer came in and took over, and Cabela's got taken over, rolled into Bass Pro Shops, it was over. It was done. Like the community was just never the same. And this is what Paul Singer does. He is a vulture capitalist, not a venture capitalist. He's a vulture capitalist. And then now he's in Twitter, right? So you got to understand who Elon Musk is playing with. He's sitting at the table with fucking sharks. And I'm not here to make a stand for Elon Musk. He's a big enough boy. He's got more money and influence than I'll ever have in this lifetime. Who knows how many more? But that's the truth, right? I mean, he's literally swimming with sharks. So when he hires somebody like Linda Yaccarino, I think that probably it's not his first hire. Although when we look at his chart and her chart, I'll show you why they connect. It is really the aggregate of also who's on the board. And again, I don't know the totality of the hiring process, but I'm assuming that they gave him about 3 or 4 candidates, and she was probably the best of all 4, which is, pick your poison, right? That's what I think, coupled with everything else. All right. And so that all happened when the sun was conjunct Uranus. And so when we have kind of a moment like that, in some people's eyes, for instance, Anomaly, who has a show, he was kind of getting into Elon Musk a little bit. And he was kind of getting into him. He's like, oh yeah, he's doing great for Twitter, and we're having more of a free speech platform. And then all of a sudden, he does this. So this is what happens when the sun is in Taurus. We have form, and it becomes consistent. In a brief period of time, people were consistently seeing the types of changes they thought were in their best interests and in Twitter's best interest. And finally, this idea that there would be a leveling of the playing field when it came to some of these platforms. It's very Taurian. And then as soon as the sun conjuncted Uranus, when I say Taurian, meaning that you have like solid ground, like there's solid ground. And all of a sudden the sun conjuncts Taurus, and then boom, there's this radical change. And we're dealing with things like what? Technology. So now the sun is beyond Taurus, right? So now we're in a very interesting territory. In terms of Twitter, the change has been made, right? And we may not see the outcome of that change until Mercury goes direct. I think it starts going direct next week. And it was on the 15th. Is that right? Oh shit, it might be tomorrow. Let me just check here. I got to get my astrological coordinates so I can keep my bona fides. Give me 1 second. It's tomorrow, isn't it? The 14th or 15th? Let's see. I am not a huge Mercury retrograde person, I have to say. And the reason why is because I don't want to empower Mercury retrograde. And I've felt that position has really been a good one to take. Take note of it, deal with it, don't freak out about it. Do not freak out about Mercury retrograde. Let's see. Yes, indeed. Tomorrow it is direct, and it's going to hit. Let's see, when did he hire her? He hired Wednesday, Thursday. So let's look at Mercury around 18 degrees. So let's go to Thursday, June 1st. Thursday, June 1st, Friday, June 2nd. Now we're getting into that same degree that Musk hired her at. We'll have more information by then, for sure. We'll see more. If that stuff is important to you, it may not be that important to you, but I think more cards will be on the table at that time. And I could see where there would be a roadmap for Twitter on the economic side. Now, remember, I think we're coming up on Tucker Carlson's birthday. And would Tucker Carlson broadcast through Twitter, even though somebody like Linda Yaccarino has come on and decided to, and they've decided to hire her, and she has all these ties to the World Economic Forum and, basically the globalist shitbags. I would think Tucker would do it. I think he would do it. And I think he would do it because they want to make money. That's the goal, right? That is why this woman was hired. Yeah, there's the diversity part. Yeah, there's her WF bona fides, but they want to make money. And this woman has a track record of making money and tying, content to dollars. So they want to make money. And where else is Tucker going to go? Where else is he going to go? Is he going to start his own YouTube channel? I guess he could, I suppose. But what happens when Tucker's not in charge of his ads? What happens when they start running ads on Tucker's channel, which they would? because it's eyeballs. What happens if those ads are from the pharmaceutical companies that Tucker doesn't like, right? And and they could throw all kinds of money at him, but let's be clear. OAN and Newsmax, even though Newsmax's ratings have gone up, they're kind of small fish, and they're in a lot of ways they're still old school media. And Uranus is going to be conjuncting Tucker's sun. We just talked about Uranus, the Sun Uranus conjunction. Uranus is going to conjunct Tucker's sun, and that's very technological. So Tucker is about to morph into this new, for lack of a better term, operating system of his life, right? So it'll be interesting. I don't think when Tucker was at Fox News, there was plenty of quote unquote globalist undercurrents in Fox News, whether it was in the production team or whether it was in sponsors. It was there, and he knew it, and it didn't matter to him, right? Because he had a window to the world. He was making really good money, and he had the highest rated show on television. Would it have been better if he had sponsors that were sponsoring him with, I don't know, diesel engines or combustion engines? Maybe. Would he have rather had Maker's Mark or Remington as a sponsor? I don't know. All I knew is he had a platform and it was big, and I think he understood that there's deals that get made in media and commerce. I don't think that changes with Twitter. I don't think it changes. And if it does change, then he can always leave. He doesn't have to sign a contract. But trust me, Twitter wants those eyeballs, because when Tucker speaks, it's huge. It's huge. So we got Mercury direct tomorrow. So all you Mercury retrograders out there can breathe easy. But what about the shadow? Don't worry about the shadow. Don't worry about it. Just make decisions. Make sound decisions, and you'll be fine. Let's go back to the chart in a moment. Okay. We were just Sun conjunct Uranus. We're getting ready. I think it's this week. Mars begins. I think the end of the week. Here, let me bring up my other window so I can look at things without having to interrupt the stream. Okay, let's do this. Right there. Let's look at this this Mars Pluto opposition, which I think is heavy. Look, that's 7 days away. 7 days away. What's this? What's that? What account is that? Oh, a different account. All right. Sorry. I got distracted. Let's see. Here we go. Let's get back into the mix. That's what happens when you have a ton of windows open. And usually I'm good with that, but that one was a little bit tricky. Here we go. Close this and bring this back up. Here we are. Okay. Yeah, so the 21st, so we're 7 days away. We're getting into this Mars Pluto opposition. Man, I got to be honest with you. I don't like it. I really don't like it. I don't like this opposition. It's fixed. It's definitely going to be part of this square with the true node and the square with the south node. I am not a fan of this opposition. And without trying to paint too much of a dark picture around it, you know, when I see Mars in Leo, when I see Leo, I think of children. I think kids. You know, you'll see it with Gemini. Of course, we have the sun up to 7 degrees away from Gemini. That'll be on the 21st. And the 21st is when Mars goes into Leo. And we're coming to that point of the year where school is about to be let out, right? And one of the things that, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that we did not encounter a lot of in 2023 was school shootings. We had the one in Nashville, which is weird, right? And I think a lot of people are still waiting for the manifesto. But outside of that, we haven't had a lot of school shootings. It's amazing how many school shootings there were when Trump was president. That it was like shocking. It's like, if I'm Trump, I'm like, the fuck is going on here? Can you assholes figure out why this is happening? Just figure out why it's happening, okay? I would say my commentary from my other channel in some regards to this, because it is not, has nothing to do really with the Second Amendment. It has a lot more to do with let's just say that there are psychologically operational vested interests involved. And there's a lot of that going on during the Trump admin. Of course, the most famous one being the Marjorie Stoneman School in Parkland, which is it's not quite in Trump town, but Roger Stone is his buddy. His son was, I think, deputy assistant to Scott Israel, the guy who was the sheriff there. He was deputy sheriff. Like weird, like 6 degrees of separation, Trumpy stuff. But we haven't had a lot. But this Mars-Pluto opposition is troubling in that regard, because the clock is running, right? We're almost fully out of school here. I think probably by the end of the month, we'll be out of school for most schools. And yet, if there was an opposition, an astrological opposition that would fit under that umbrella of a school shooting, it would be this one. It would be this Mars-Pluto opposition right here, which is exact on the 21st. But as it approaches, you know, the 20th and the 19th, we get into that really intense fixed opposition with these two energies. Definitely Chiron. Well, the gun stuff is in the air with Chiron and Aries. And we've talked about that coming up on the Chiron return of the US. And one of the things I started to talk about, was it last week or the week before, is the whole vigilante action. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that with Chiron getting closer to the US Chiron return. And sometimes, as we've seen, things aren't always as they appear to be. In what looks like something on the surface, something that is very quickly pounced upon by political forces, isn't the thing that we're being shown. quickly thereafter. You know what I'm saying? Like all of a sudden, there's this shooting that happens. And then in the course of 2 to 3 hours, they realize that the profile of the shooter doesn't really fit the profile that theoretically people inside the media would love for that person to fit. We're getting to this point now where it really doesn't matter, right? There was a period of time where where it was like, oh, wow, what? No, they don't fit the profile. All right, let's just shove it aside and move on. Until finally somebody fits the profile, and all of a sudden it's all in, right? Now we're getting to this point where if it doesn't fit the profile, it doesn't matter. We saw that in Nashville. We've seen that twice here in Texas, once outside of Houston and once in Allen. Both of those people, all three of those people, didn't fit the so-called profile. What is the profile? Well, the profile, as we have become programmed to understand the profile, is a white, single, generally lone wolf male who has some extremist tendencies, right? That's the profile. Those three individuals of those three shootings did not fit the profile, but yet they're going forward now. They don't care, right? There's no care anymore about, a gun is a gun at this point, right? That's what's going on. A gun is a gun, and they're going to do everything in their power in order to enforce greater limitations when it comes to gun ownership in the Second Amendment. And so when I see this Mars-Pluto opposition, it's like, okay, here we go, right? And it's going to be really at the beginning of Leo. So that Mars is very powerful, very, very powerful. And what comes out of that, you have things like royal decrees. Like this is how it's going to be moving forward. The other thing too, you got to throw this into the mix is Jupiter, because Jupiter is about ready to go into Taurus. So we're going to have Jupiter here squaring Mars, squaring Pluto. Boy, oh boy. And Jupiter is making everything bigger. All right. This is, to me, this T square is troubling. So when we talk about Jupiter and Taurus, we're talking about big bodies, big body count, right? Is that in the mix? We have the true node coming in here, conjuncting Jupiter, making it even more of a focal point. I think that this is a troubling. So look at these days, right? And hopefully I am completely wrong. 21st, 20th, 19th. Started with 19th, 20th, 21st. 21st, we get the opposition. By that time, Jupiter is going to be pretty darn close to being right in that notch. Let me see here. We got 21st. Yeah, Jupiter goes into Taurus on the 17th. So we're going to have Mars, Pluto, and Jupiter all in this T square. Wow. All fixed sign too. All fixed sign. You throw the South Node in Scorpio on the other side of it. We got a Grand Cross, fixed Grand Cross. That's big. That's big energy. And I'm trying to look at this from a positive perspective, but it's not that I don't think I could frame it positively. Oh, that's peachy. What are you doing? You want to come over here? Want to be part of the show? Come on up here. Come on. I'm sure people want to see you. Come on. Come do your thing. Come on. You were up here before. Come on. Come up here. Well, come up here. I don't want to pull you up. Come on. Come on. You can come up here. Come on. Come on. You've been up here before. Come on. Well, come up. I want to meet you. Well, you can do it. Let's go. You were up here before. But you're being a cat now. Come on. She's such a cat. You want me to feed you. That's why you're here. That is why you're here. She's a trip, man. I'm trying to spin this positively. Here's what I do think about Jupiter and Taurus. I think there's a window here in terms of purchasing power. I've heard that they are thinking about bringing rates down. That's what I've heard. I don't know. I've heard it. Word in the street is that they might bring rates down. But I do believe between now and when Jupiter goes retrograde, we have a bit of a window here in terms of purchasing power. If you're in the real estate world, I think you should take advantage of it. Whether you want to buy, whether you want to sell, I think this window closes in September when Jupiter goes retrograde on the 5th of September. So between the 17th of May and the 5th of September, I guess if you want to include maybe the station period, Jupiter 1534, where things start to kind of plateau and flatten out, that would be September 1st. I think it's actually pretty good. I think we have basically a good money phase here. So I'm not going to get into some of the fear porn around the money, not right now. So I think there's a window, and I've talked about this window. And so that's something positive. And as Jupiter moves into Taurus, it'll be a wide sextile to Venus. Now, I think that those moments are important. So we're talking 3 days from now. By that time, I think Venus will be at what, about 9? So it's a wide sextile. So we look at that. That's like an imprint for Jupiter and Taurus early on, right? Like it's an imprint. So when a planet goes to 0, when it moves into a new sign, you want to look at kind of what the other planets are doing, because it has an outcome, or it has, it's not really quite an outcome. It has an impact on the energy of that planet. Like it's just coming into the sign. It's being born new, right? Newborn sign. And so we look at the newborn sign and what are all of the aspects that are associated with that at that 0 degree. That's an important element to it. That's an important element to the story. So I do think that with this wide sextile with Venus, I do think that there's some selling and purchasing power and a window for that in terms of land and real estate until we get into September. I could see that. The other thing too is that, this Mars-Pluto opposition is part of Jupiter right there, right in Taurus at 0 degrees. So when we think of Taurus in the second house, what do we think of? We think of safety and security. This is the thing that rules our values, our physical values. And Jupiter and Taurus makes that bigger. It just makes it all bigger. So when we have a Mars Jupiter square or the Pluto Jupiter square, and especially at 0 Taurus, it amplifies that, right? It amplifies our people's need for security, safety. And that's going to be a big part of this Jupiter transit, because Mars and Pluto are going to be square Jupiter right at the beginning, right at the inception. Right. That's part of the creation story of Jupiter for the next 12 months, essentially. The other thing that plays a role here, and this also gets into this whole idea of safety and security, and we're going to get into this with the border when we start talking about it, is the fact that if we get, and I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, if we get in this country 30,000 people a week coming through, that's 150,000 people a month. That's over 1 million people, right? It could be more, over 1 million people a year. And this theoretically will not stop until, again, theoretically, there's another president. Because I can tell you right now, Greg Abbott, who's the governor of this state, isn't doing shit. He's sending his people down there. They're just mostly window dressing. and helping people get on buses, but that's a different story. This is where we get into this whole idea of displacement. And if you think about how BlackRock and a lot of these other Vanguard, a lot of these other major hedge funds, money market funds, and I mean, they have, if you put together Vanguard and BlackRock and First Street and just those three alone, they would probably equal maybe the second or third highest per capita country on the planet. That's how massive they are. They might even be bigger. And they've gone in and they've bought a shit ton of residential real estate. So they own a lot of residential real estate. And you have to ask yourself, where are the new people going to live? Well, that's a really good question. And so when we get into Jupiter and Taurus, and we see the square with Mars, and we see the square with Pluto, and people begin to understand that there is this idea of limited resources, they're going to get antsy and they're going to get angry, because the people who are crossing the border theoretically have to live somewhere, and they will be in competition inside of the housing market in this country. And what we know about the government is that they have been more than willing to be able to give benefits to people coming into the country that are not available to people who already live here. That's a fact. That's an absolute 100% fact. And I remember talking to a guy who, I think he owned like an AM/PM or a 7-Eleven or something like that. It was some mini mart or one of these mini marts, and he was from India or Pakistan. And it was just a really friendly conversation. And he basically said, yeah, they gave me these special loans and was able to start a business here. And these were loans that are just generally not available to residents of this country, people that pay into the system. And it's great. I'm glad he was able to get a toehold and buy a business and start a family and integrate whatever, right? But this is how this thing has evolved or de-evolved in a lot. So we can only imagine what's going to happen. And when we have Jupiter moving into Taurus, and you get people who are really concerned about their living space, their job, and you're already starting to see now, and this is something you're starting to see some pushback from the Black community about this mass migration thing, because in their minds they're thinking that their security, their future is threatened, that it's on the table, right? That's what they're thinking. They're thinking that this is a threat to their ability. And I've seen some posts, I've seen some videos coming out of that sector, and now the light is starting to go off right up here. So if a certain group who has not paid attention to this for a period of time now starts to pay attention, that is a big canary in the coal mine moment. And so when Jupiter goes into Taurus, it eventually is going to trickle down to most people that these assets are going to be reallocated, or at the very least with this T squared, that there's going to be some kind of threat to what people own. And that's coming, right? That is coming. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens over the next few weeks as it relates to that situation specifically. So we're gonna keep our eyes on that. In the meantime, we've got the moon in Pisces, and it's conjunct Neptune. You should sleep well tonight. I've had some really intense dreams the last 48 hours, man. Really intense dreams. I don't always like my dreams, but when I do dream, they're certainly memorable. Let's put it that way. I think I've sort of worked this enough in a lot of ways. We still have the Venus Saturn trine, which is happening and will happen for the next 5 or 6 days until Venus moves out of position. And again, I think that's honoring contracts and working together with people and having some degree of appreciation. These are really actually very good aspects for Mother's Day, especially with that Moon Neptune conjunction. And especially if your mom drinks, sit down and have a few shots with her with that Moon Neptune conjunction. It's almost over, isn't it? All right. Here we go. Why don't we talk about some other stuff? Let's talk about these Pluto by fire. Now, if we go back in time and we start with Pluto and Aries, and again, I'm sort of spitballing this a little bit, but let's do this. Let's go to 1830. Okay. I'll get back a couple more years. We'll have to go back even a few more years. How about that? All right, here we go. We're there. We're there. Why don't we start here? Okay, let's go back to let's go back to 1825. So this is when Pluto's at 1 degree Aries. I guess we could probably go back to 1824. But Pluto is in Aries for a really long time. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in 1850, let's just go to 1850. We have both Pluto and Uranus in Taurus. Let's see. So by the time, so Pluto, it's still Pluto in Aries in 1850. Got to say, that is a long ass Pluto, right? Long ass Pluto cycle. So 1850, we're right at the end. Pluto 29, 29, 29, 29, 29. So 29 forever. Jesus, 29 degrees forever. Retrograde. So 1851, Pluto goes into Taurus. So just think about that for a second. Was it 1828 to 1851? Right there. Right there. May 21st, last day of Taurus. It goes into Taurus. That is a long ass time. Long time for a Pluto cycle. 1828 to 1851. So you got 1838, that's 10 years. 1848, that's 20 years. And then 3 more years, 1851. Probably go back to 1827 if you wanted to get to zero. So almost 24.5 years of Pluto in Aries. That's a lot of Pluto in Aries. So why am I talking about Pluto in Aries? Because when you go back in time and you look at who was born during Pluto in Aries, you will see that those people shaped. Let's do this. I actually have a window open. They shaped the world. in a lot of ways. They shape the world. So let's go into, let's do this. Let me give you a visual. So when you get into the people that were part of this whole wave, most of them are born under Pluto and Aries. Let me give you a visual. Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, Carnegie, Morgan. You throw Thomas Edison. Not all of the robber barons are born in Pluto with Pluto and Aries. Some of them are born under Pluto and Taurus. Henry Ford, who's not a robber baron, but he was friends with Edison, was born with Pluto and Taurus. But it's these guys right here, right? This crowd, this group, they're the ones that are born mostly under Pluto and Aries. And what do? They essentially are the heads of the second industrial revolution. Now, I believe, this is just my belief, I believe that a lot of the stuff for the second industrial revolution was already here. It was technology that was already here. And that what they wound up doing is repurposing it and making it more, I would say, consumer friendly versus technology that would kind of break the beginning of what we would call the birth of the social economy, right? And this is social economy where they have to be in control. They can't give other people a sense of control or freedom in the way that perhaps some of the pre-existing technology could have, right? So it's repurposing stuff. And that's going to be an important thing to talk about when we talk about Elon Musk and this whole idea of X chat and these X technologies, because I think some of the same ideas are in play, only they're going to be deployed and distributed differently. But so we'll just put a pin on that conversation. But when we look at the robber barons, they are mostly born under Pluto in Aries. Here's the big three. Big three. Captains of industry. Carnegie, steel. Rockefeller, oil. Morgan, investment. Controlling the flow of capital and resources. And with Pluto and Aries, they're there first. They're there first. And there is this is a generation that is born with a ruthless determination in order to be the man of steel or the man of oil or the man of money, or in Edison's case, the man of technology, right? There is this, at times, Pluto can be ruthless, and Aries is getting there first. And so what we have is these guys set the table with Pluto and Aries, fire. Remember, fire is important. And when we get into, again, I believe a lot of this stuff has been repurposed. But even to do that, right, you have to use a lot of muscle. You have to use a lot of power. You have to lord over the resources in order to do that. Now, eventually, all these three would meet their match with Jacob Schiff and the Rothschilds. But that's a different conversation, right? These are the guys that are laying out, in many ways, the template for where we are now. Although with Carnegie, I don't think we produce any steel here anymore. I don't think it's environmentally friendly. So a lot of the steel is produced overseas. Chinese steel. I think for a long time, Ukraine was producing steel. I think they produce steel in the South Pacific as well. But that's how Pluto and Aries rolls, right? I mean, they're literally forging this this stuff, this matter, this fire. And even looking at steel, like the whole idea of steel to me is very Aries like. They're using this fundamental fire to, like forge buildings and bridges and to some degree railroad track and that part of the story. I think is Rockefeller in Aries. He might even be in Aries. But this is a really important kind of understanding to have, right? And it's through this application of this fundamental fire and this idea that the individual could profit from harnessing the resources is a brand new idea. Because these guys couldn't do this in Europe. And again, I'm not here to lionize them or put them up on a pedestal, but they, in a lot of ways, they're essential players in the world that we're currently, like, we couldn't live in this world. Maybe the world would be better if they weren't involved. Maybe tapping into some of the technology that I think they did stumble upon and then kind of reconfigure for consumer purposes, maybe we'd be better off. But to a large extent, the world that we're in is based upon the world that these guys began to create. And you couldn't have done that in Europe because all that stuff would have been sewn up already by people who were part of a royal bloodline, or they were landed, or they were part of some kind of a registry, or the titles from the Dutch East Indies, or the Dutch West Indies companies didn't allow for it, that somebody else already had claim to it, right? That shit just couldn't happen in Europe. It happened here. When you go into Europe, they don't have characters like this. In fact, it was these guys that helped build Germany, not once, but twice, 3 times, if you consider after the war. Like, it's these characters. You don't get these stories from Europe. So again, it's also in Aries talk is part of this whole idea of manifest destiny. We look at Pluto and Aries as being part of that. You grab the world, right, by the balls, and theoretically, you get something out of it. Now, is this a fair playing field? Probably not. But I'm not here to discuss what's fair or not. This is what's happened. Right. So Pluto and Aries is big. If you don't understand it already, then try to wrap your head around it. For better or worse, it is through the embodiment of these men who have Pluto and Aries in their chart that sets the tone for everything. Manufacturing, production, transportation, distribution of goods, services, and in Morgan's case, capital. Very important. All right. That is fire. It's an important aspect of fire. It sets everything in motion. Okay. Now, I know you guys are sharp, because if I asked you this question, you would already know the answer to it. But for those who are still kind of new to this whole thing, we have to be fair. So where is the next stop with Pluto in fire? Oh, well, we're going to go to 1942. 1942. So what happens in 1942? Yes. You know what happens in 19. I'm just waiting for my PDF to kick in. Here we go. Actually, I guess it's before 1942. I didn't realize that Pluto in Leo goes back so far. We usually think of Pluto and Leo, like the first baby boomers really are born around 1945, 46. The war ends, men come home. right? But we can see Pluto and Leo very early on. We could go back to 1939 and encounter Pluto and Leo. But that's not when the baby boomers are really being born. And we're waiting for those soldiers to come home. So if we go to, let's go to 1944. That's when everything's starting to wind down a little bit. 1944. I think it's 1945. The war is over, right? So by the time we hit 1944, we're at Pluto and Leo at 8 degrees. I'll show you. Right there. So this is where, like, we can even go back to let's just say 44. This is where the baby boomers are starting to be born. And again, Pluto and Leo. Now, by the time we get to, 1957, that's a pretty long Pluto run. Like, you could go back to 1939, and you'll see Pluto and Leo. By 1957, Pluto's in Virgo. So that's 18 years. That's a pretty long Pluto run. But this is where the baby boomers are going to be born. So now we have Pluto and Leo, which again is fire, right? But it's a different kind of fire. And the impact that the baby boomers, although you'll have some people that'll come out of this period that will be, like Steve Jobs is a baby boomer. Okay. So he's kind of a bit of a titan of industry, but he's different, right? It's not like his whole thing with Apple is all about fucking design. He wants it to look cool, right? He wants it to look cooler than anything else. He wants it to function better. It's not about how many of these can we sell. That would have been Pluto and Aries. No, it's more about it looking cool, it having an aesthetic value. So you'll get some captains of industry, but they're not really going to be born during this time. Even somebody like Lee Iacocca, who saves the automobile industry, is not a baby boomer. He comes out of another generation. So what you get out of the baby boomers is something very, very different. But you're still dealing with fire here, but the fire has a different application. And with baby boomers, what are we talking about? We're talking about things like film. And in my estimation, the greatest filmmakers are the baby boomers. They're the greatest filmmakers. And even some of the late Pluto and Cancer types, but the baby boomers are to me, they're the best filmmakers. Like, they're coming of age in the late 60s. Like, they're at like USC Film School in the late 60s. And they're learning film in a very different kind of way. And their imprint on cinema is incredible. Right. So when we think of Pluto and Leo, the big contribution to this whole idea that fire is this oven that stokes creation, really, in my estimation, has to do with the arts. And you break it down into cinema and music. And again, I think some of the best music comes out of the baby boomers. Like, some of the best. Doesn't matter, rock, soul, jazz. I mean, across the board, all these really incredible musicians who are around and making music during that time. They're just, great. We're not going to see that again. We're not going to see somebody like Jeff Beck, although I think Jeff Beck is born in 39. So he's right at the beginning, I think, of Pluto and Leo. We'll never see another Jeff Beck again. We'll see people that can play, right, but not in the way that Jeff Beck did, and how he came about and developed his style of guitar playing and all the things that went into that. We won't see it ever again. And so the baby boomers, Pluto and Leo, were really good at that. They were great at music, terrific. Cinema, fantastic. Writers, there's some great baby boomer writers that have come along, although some of the earlier generations are kind of interesting. Like, if you're into that sort of thing, Hemingway, Joyce, some of those people. But there's some great writers that come along during that period, people born during that time. And also actors. A lot of the, we grew up with some of the great, although if you look at people like Clint Eastwood and Paul Newman, I think some of those guys are actually born pre-baby boom. I think Clint Eastwood is the same age as my mother, who has Pluto and Cancer. So we're talking, kind of just after that. We're talking the De Niro's, the Pacinos, the Dustin Hoffmans. Those guys are all baby boomers. So these are the actors that, in our generation, make huge impacts, and actresses too, not just actors, actresses as well. So they're known for the arts. If you look at sports, you'll run into like great baby boomer sports figures, people like Will Chamberlain and Bill Russell and Jim Brown, and in that world, Nolan Ryan's a baby, so in athletics, we see, Bruce Jenner is a fucking baby boomer, right? And what did Bruce Jenner do? He became the greatest athlete in the world by winning the decathlon in Montreal. He was such a good athlete. He was drafted by a team in the NBA. I don't know if he can fucking play basketball, but I saw he was drafted by a team in the NBA. You look in the records for the draft, and you'll see Caitlyn Jenner. Who the fuck drafted Caitlyn? Who, right? Like Caitlyn Jenner was drafted. Well, Caitlyn was Bruce at the time. But athletics are another area, this group of people excel, and even the foodies, the food under the baby boomers and Pluto and Leo, cuisine explodes. Totally explodes. You have the whole West Coast sort of California cuisine, which really takes off. And you have Anthony Bourdain. Bourdain's a baby boomer. He's kind of right at, I think Bourdain is 56, but he's right at the edge of the baby boom. You have what's his name? Marco Pierre White, who's a baby boomer, and they all looked at Marco Pierre White. This guy turns cuisine upside down and inside. So you have all these really interesting figures in sports, in music, in cinema. I think to some degree literature. There's some great baby boomer writers, but those are the areas I think they really excel in. I think they suck at politics. We have the rise of the kind of the rock star politician. Bill Clinton is the top of the pyramid for the baby boomers. And honestly, he sucked. Right. But he fulfills that role. He's on Arsenio Hall, who I believe is an Aquarian, and, using this late night talk show, and Bill Clinton, who's a Leo, and he's playing saxophone. Right. That's what fucking Bill Clinton is known for, in a stained dress and selling out secrets. So I think the baby boomers at that level, not so great. Not so great. And even Trump is a baby boomer. And I think Biden is right at the edge. A little bit older than Trump. I think Trump's born, 47? I think Biden is born 45. He's still a baby boomer. Sorry, Biden sucks. He's always sucked. And I don't think that there have been, and I'm just talking to the United States now. So, but Tony Blair's a baby boomer. If you want to get down to Angela Merkel's a baby boomer. So you can see this, right? I mean, and it feels to me like when Pluto and Leo gets to a certain position in government, they become entitled. They have this idea that they're carrying out the sort of the negative version of this endowment of nobility or some kind of royal decree. That, oh, you're the one that has been anointed to lead the people, right? They take on the role of the exact thing that theoretically this country was started against. It's this kind of the beginning of the soft dictatorship in some ways. They're seduced by power in a lot of ways. Power, position. It's not where they're at their best. And you would think that that's where, I'm like, look at that. You would think that that's where they'd be at their best, but I don't think that's really where they're at. They're at their best by making art. Great movies, great music, really fucking interesting food. really interesting actors. We get this whole idea of stars that are sort of coming out of this new wave of cinema. And then athletes, these kind of really interesting, like Muhammad Ali, or, we've gone through some of them already. Like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is a baby boomer, one of the greatest basketball players of all time. Baby boomer. Jim Brown. I think Jim was Jim Brown a baby. I think he might have been. O.J. Simpson is definitely a fucking baby boomer, right? And there was no bigger star at one point in time than O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson was on TV and doing commercials. He was leading the National Football League in rushing. He was in movies, right? O.J. is the prototypical baby boomer. He's crossing over. He's doing all this stuff, right? So that's Pluto and Leo, and I really feel like that's where their contribution is. That's really where their contribution is. It lies in the arts. It lies in in performance, and that performance can be performing arts or performing on a stage or a field, right? And the arts can be anything. It could be the cinematic arts. It could be culinary art. It could be, to some degree, literary arts. That's where, for me, Pluto and Leo really excels. And I think a lot of their art and creations, in a lot of ways, are going to be unparalleled. We'll look back and go, wow. And it wasn't just like one or two people. I mean, it was a whole fucking generation of really fucking creative people. When it came to actually running things, and I feel like, they still had to deal with a lot of these Pluto and Cancer people. And even beyond them, like, people like Henry Kissinger was born with Pluto and fucking Gemini. So could they have really led? No, I don't think so. I think there were older forces that were still very much entrenched. Dianne Feinstein's a classic example. She's in her fucking 90s, right? That's a whole other generation. And I guess one could make a case, although I'm not here to carry water for the Pluto and Leo, the baby boomers, that in some ways they hit their glass ceiling through leadership. They hit the glass ceiling. And there are always these external forces that were much older and way more entrenched that were not going to allow them to theoretically execute on their plan. And somewhere along the way, they almost wound up being, I think, sold out or bought out. When I look at Clinton, I definitely look at bought out for sure. Anyway, so that's Pluto and Leo. Do you get the picture? So we start off with Pluto and Aries, and they're the ones that come down and they essentially forge all the resources or reforge them to create the world. Then you have Pluto and Leo that come along, and they're kind of in this place of more luxury. And that's what Leo is about. It's much more about luxury and fun and entertainment. And that's what they give us. They give us the best entertainment. They give us the best movies, the most memorable TV, the beginnings of some of the best food. And let's face it, sports for entertainment as well. And that's where really they excel. It's in that fifth house territory. When they get out of the fifth house, that's where I think they run into shortcomings. And again, some of that I think is a byproduct of kind of the indulgence of the culture, and reaching a zenith point and saying, okay, we're here, we made it, and that's that, right? I think there's part of that, but it's also some of the is entrenched forces. Even if let's say Bill Clinton bought into his own hype, right? There's no fucking way Bill Clinton was ever going to be allowed to change the world. No way whatsoever. There are too many other people from another generation, Pluto and Cancer, Pluto and Gemini, are just like, no, fuck you. Just go along for the ride. Just blow the sax, blow your wad, and just go along for the ride. And that's exactly what he did. So now that brings us to Pluto and Sag, which shows up in 1996. I know this by heart in my head. 1996, a little bit 95, but really 96. And then 2009 it's over. It's a very short run in a lot of ways. If you really, really look at it, it's a very short run. And at the most, what are we talking about? 95 to maybe 15 years. And that's with some intermittent retrogrades. It's nothing like Pluto and Aries, or even Pluto and Leo for that matter. You know, you go to 1939, ending in 1957. That's 18 years, right? 18 years of Pluto. This is much shorter. The three years is significant in terms of Pluto transits. So when we look at Pluto and Sagittarius, this is the next fire generation. So we know that one generation came in and forged everything, right? This idea of the self, manifest destiny, picking yourself up by your own bootstraps, harnessing all the energy, harnessing all the power for better or worse, right? They come along. Then Pluto and Leo comes along and says, we don't have to do that. It's already here. Those things are already in place. You know, what are we going to do best? We're going to create. We're going to create. We're going to make art, right? That's what we're going to do. And that's really where they're at their best, as far as I'm concerned. That's where they're at their best. Now we have Pluto and Sag. And because once they have shown up and now they're here, right? Remember, these generations, these fire generations make big impacts, really big impacts. Fire is creation. So we have the creation of the modern trade world, right? Let's just use that as a label. We have the creation of art and cinema, and the creation of creativity in a lot of ways. And now we have the creation of something new. What is Pluto and Sag going to bring to the table? They are going to bring the philosophical and religious fire to our world. Right? This is in as much as we've been shaped by Pluto and Aries and the world itself, right? In as much as we've been shaped by the artistic and aesthetic visions of Pluto and Leo, will be shaped by the religious, spiritual, and philosophical imprint of Pluto and Sagittarius. And do not, I keep talking about this generation. Do not underestimate them. Now, by the time you get to Sagittarius, you're kind of running out of fire, right? Like it's really intense with Aries. It's just, pure fire. Then when we get to Leo, we get the self-conscious fire. That's, the ego is self-conscious. And Leo is connected to ego. So we get self-conscious fire. By the time we get to Pluto and Sagittarius, we're in a very different kind of fire, right? This is sort of the cold fire of Jupiter and beyond, right? Like even Mars is closer than Jupiter. The sun, of course, is, Leo. So we're going further out with Jupiter in this idea of fire. And to me, Sagittarius is cosmic fire. When we deal with Aries, we're dealing with primary fire, right? The fire that you would encounter around a campfire, that's Aries. It is primary fire. It's primal. If we go back to this idea that we come out of this whole Neanderthal or Cro-Magnon world, that's what you're going to encounter. The quest for fire. That's all Aries, right? When we get into Leo, we get into a different kind of fire. We're into electric fire with Leo, because it's electricity now that's lighting our streets. It's lighting our appliances. That's what Leo is. It's electric fire. It's the same kind of light that illuminates a strip of film, right? That's the type of fire we're dealing with Leo, is electric fire. When we get to Sagittarius, we're dealing with cosmic fire. We're dealing with the fire of the stars. We're dealing with the fire of the luminaries that are up there, right? It's kind of it is fire, but it's a cool fire. It's a different kind of fire. And I think that this generation is going to be real, and I know that they catch a lot of shit. And in a lot of ways, they deserve it, right? I mean, every generation has shit that they deserve. I'm not going to sit here and point fingers, but look around and you'll find a lot of people inside of the in the Gen Z world, Pluto and Sag, that conform. They conform to this idea that they're fucking crazy. They've got blue hair. They've got weird TikTok videos with weird recipes, right? But there's a lot more to them than that. Trust me, a lot more to them. I was watching Matt, what's his name, from the Daily Wire. What's a woman, that Matt, and he had this video of this young woman. You could tell she was Gen Z, and she was talking about why capitalism sucks. And to her credit, even though she was wrong about some things, she was right about a lot more than she was wrong. And Matt Walsh was using her video to show how kind of deluded this younger generation is. I wouldn't have gone that far. And really, all she needed was a few tweaks, right? You could tell that this was a person, young woman, who understand that a lot of what we deal with in the world is bullshit, real bullshit. And when you get to, like, when I was growing up, when a lot of you were growing up, you had like I had a paper route, and first of all, you can't, if you're a kid, you can't even get a paper route anymore. Those are jobs. If it's a city or a town or a large town, those jobs are handled by people with cars, right? The paper route became an adult job at some point. It just stopped being a kid's job, or there were certain things you could do when you were young and you could get a gig, and those things aren't there anymore. And that's not to say that, Gen Z can't make money on the internet. There's some fucking millionaire Gen Z kids. Of course there are. They know how to work that shit, right? But at the end of the day, they look around, they say, well, what's on the table here? There's not a lot on the table. There's just not a lot on the table. And if you go a traditional route, you'll work a couple of shit jobs if you're lucky, right? Or maybe you'll get a degree if you're lucky. Who knows what's going to happen if you get a degree and what the world's going to be like 5 years from now when you get your degree or graduate, unless you get it in some kind of hard science. You're kind of fucked, really, because of AI, honestly. So this is a generation that knows that. They understand it. They get it. Started a bit with Pluto and Scorpio. But unlike Pluto and Scorpio and the millennials, Sagittarius is mutable. Like Scorpio is fixed, and a lot of millennials are really entrenched. And unless they just completely burn, and I've talked about this, unless they just completely burn through their beliefs or non-beliefs or disbeliefs or whatever they are, unless they completely burn through them and get to the other side, it's very hard, I think, for millennials. Very hard. It can be done. Trust me, it can be done. But you almost have to leave everything behind and then create something new out of the ashes of the thing that they left behind. But it's very difficult for a lot of people to do that. And I think where millennials get really tripped up is a lot of them are born with this Neptune-Uranus conjunction in Capricorn, which is hard. I think it's really, like that conjunction is really hard, and it's during that time when a lot of the bullshit with Clinton starts to come out. And it's like, oh, wow, look at this guy. Yeah. Yeah, he's just basically, another one. Right. He's another one. It's more of the same. So you can see the disillusionment, even though they didn't experience it. It was literally in the atmosphere, right? It was in the atmosphere and it was in the stars. And you started to see a lot of early, video material being made about the Clintons. And people were zeroing in on it, right? They were zeroing in on what they were about. And it was all about control, power control, and the beginning of the selling off of America, which it started before then, really started when Nixon went to China, but it really picked up speed with the Clintons. But Gen Z, unlike the millennials who have to just burn through that stuff, they don't. they could pivot, right? And this is the nature of the immutable signs. And keep in mind, and we haven't even gotten to Uranus and Neptune, which I've talked about before. Really, like it's either going to be in Aquarius or Pisces, maybe a little bit of Capricorn early on. But like my kid has Uranus and Pisces and Neptune and Aquarius. Other Gen Zers have Neptune and Aquarius and Uranus and Aquarius, but they all have one thing in common, and that's Pluto and Sagittarius. And so just as we saw a generation with Pluto and Aries really forge this so-called reality and this idea of the individual, and then this next generation, Pluto and Leo, forge the kind of from the fruits of that in a lot of ways, the sort of brilliant procurement of art and creativity that's associated with that sign. This next generation is going to reshape our philosophical understanding of the universe. And I think they're going to be very important. And they're obviously they're going to go through some growing pains. But I have had a number of Gen Z clients, and I've been real again, I can't stress this enough, how blown away I've been by a lot of them. That their level of maturity and understanding and insight is like it was way beyond my years when I was in my 20s. I'm just being straight up and honest. Like these people, these young people are really switched on in a lot of ways. And what'll be interesting is that the philosophy and the understanding that comes out of this generation, like you would think that some of the best ideas would come out of a group of people that have a lot of leisure time on their hands. That was one of the things that this young woman was talking about in this Matt Walsh thing. Like there's no time for anything. Like all you do is fucking work all the time. And if you're not working, you're doing, and he even agreed with her to a large extent on that part. So what kind of philosophy will be born out of that reality? Or if we look at, which we will, this whole kind of, the migrant crisis, what kind of philosophy will be born out of that? Because usually, like for instance, let's take Marx, for example. Marx was a ne'er-do-well, and he always he sponged off other people, right? Whether it was his parents or whether it was one of his wives or whether it was Engels, he was a sponger. And so he had all this time to kind of think about things. I mean, this is what happens when you live in a society of some degree of affluence and leisure. Like people can think about the nature of the universe. They can, let their minds roam a little bit because they don't have to think, about having to go out to the forest and go capture food all the time. Right. That they don't have to think about that. They're kind of near the top of Maslow's pyramid. So, and that's really the top of the chart too, with Sagittarius in the 9th house. So what kind of philosophies are going to be born out of this time? Now, next week on Friday, we'll have Narco Longo on the show, who I think is a great example, or even Jeff in the chat, who's a great example of this generation that I'm talking about. And, like they're figuring it out. I think Narco's brother made some money and they invested in a bookstore. And out of this bookstore, they're doing all these streams and podcasts and creating a really interesting community, right? So maybe we can find some cookie crumbs here, where we can see how this is done, right? I was like, oh, okay. You made a little money in this little transaction over here, this little trade, right? Well, what do you do with it? Well, let's have a base of operation and let's build from there. And so out of that comes this kind of, deep philosophical exploration. And it's just one node. There are all these other nodes with Pluto and Sagittarius. And these are the people, these young people, please do not sell them short. And every generation has their own little piece to add to the cathedral of evolution in time, right? Will Pluto and Sagittarius bring us the Will it bring us the bell to ring at the top of the theoretical cathedral, even though the bell probably performs some other fucking function, right? We'll see, right? It's a lot to heap on their shoulders. And I'm not looking for a younger generation to theoretically save us. But every time we encounter this Pluto in a fire sign, this generation really adds to this evolutionary cycle. And so when we look at that ninth house, we're looking at expansion, big ideas, right? Big paradigms, leaps in philosophical understanding. And I'm looking forward to it, and I really am. And I'm already enjoying my encounter with a lot of these, Pluto and Sag kids. Are they going to fuck up? Well, yeah, sure. Every Pluto and fire generation has the fuck up kind of built into it. Like the Pluto and Aries generation, the robber barons, they just want it all themselves. Like, fuck you, fuck you. We're going to have monopolies, right? That's that Aries thing. It's just, it's just us, just our tight little group that we all kind of agreed upon, right? And then the Rothschilds came in and they taught them a lesson. And then, of course, they broke up some of the monopolies. And, I think it actually helped Rockefeller more than it hurt them, but that's another story. But that's it, man. They were just all about themselves, right? All about themselves. And yeah, so the upside is they forged the steel and the highways and the fuel and the oil and all that other shit. But at the end of the day, it was just all about them. Pluto and Leo, big, great art, totally great art, totally, and a few other things. But at the end of the day, when it came to them actually leading, I don't think they did the best job. I don't. And if they did, or if they tried, they probably were. I mean, I'm sure that there's some good Pluto and Leo leaders out there. I'm just trying to wrap my head around. I'll tell you, a baby boomer is going to make his impact is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It's going to be interesting, when as he continues to kind of uncoil his story during the selection cycle. He's a baby boomer. Trump's a baby boomer. Biden's a baby boomer. Hillary's a baby boomer. Marianne Williamson's a baby boomer. The only person who's not running that's a baby boomer, I think, is Vivek Ramaswamy, at least for now. He's a millennial. But anyway, that's their kind of, every generation has their Achilles heel in a lot of ways. And the Achilles heel for Pluto and Sag, I think it could go in two different directions. One can be do as I say and not as I do, which I think sometimes is a very Sagittarian kind of modality, right? That's one of it. Do as I say, not as I do. And there can be, I think, perhaps the threat of being kind of philosophical dilettantes in some ways. There's a threat of it. The other side is that Sagittarius can be extremely dogmatic, and we could see some of that, right? Like Nick Fuentes would be an example. Nick Fuentes is really dogmatic, and he's based, right? Quote unquote based. He's Pluto and Sag, and so you'll see some of that. On the other side of the spectrum, you'll see maybe some really hardcore, like gender rights activist crazies with Pluto. I mean, when you get into the crazy dogma, Sagittarius can be, right up there with the best of them, right? But if they can move through that, I think this is a very interesting generation, and they will be known for their breakthroughs in things like philosophy and law and religion and these higher concepts of the mind. So, that kind of brings us to the end of this trinity, this fire trinity, where Pluto has a very indelible stamp on a particular generation through fire. So I hope you can kind of get it and see it. And I'm sure there'll be a few jokes cracked along the way with Gen Z. Trust me. Let's jump into Elon's hire. Linda Yaccarino. Should we do a little visual of her? Should we do a little visual? She's bubbly. She's got a bubbly vibe. She's a Sagittarius. Here, let's do this. Let's do Linda Yaccarino. Let's see if we can find her. She's bubbly and cheery. Let's see. Musk pick for CEO. Fascinating turnaround. Fascinating. Let me see. Linda Yaccarino. Mask. Let's see if we find her mask video. There's a video of her where she's telling people to mask up. Mask up or pack up. One of the two. So I can find this. Here, I've got to go out of Twitter. Give me 1 sec. All right. Let's see. This is it. Okay, this is what I was looking for. All right, so this gives you an example of her bubbly little personality. All right. Oh, I got to go back. Hold on. This is not a. I got to do that. I'm sure you guys have seen this. All right, here we go.
Linda Yaccarino here, class of 1980. We're not here to talk about that. We are here to talk about masking up or packing up. I promise you, we're doing good so far. Just keep your distance, get your hands washed often, get tested often, and wear your mask. That'll get us closer and closer to normal days. We are resilient. We are tough. Keep doing it. And we'll be back at Beaver Stadium before you know it. Mask up or pack up. We're almost there. We are.
Okay. It's a little cray-cray there at the end. But I played that video for a reason because everybody else is playing it. That's the Sagittarius. Right? She's enthusiastic. She's enthusiastic. She's smiling, right? That's what fire does. Fire gets you fired up. Now, I don't agree with her at all, but that's she's like really into it. And I believe she believes it. And I know the background. She's, World Economic Forum and all this stuff. And I'm not here to, again, I'm not here to promote her. Please, let's get it on the table. But she believes it, right? You don't have that, like, I can never fucking do that. Because number one, I'm not a Sagittarius. Number two, I don't have that level of transference, right? That's what it takes. She believed that shit. And she's a salesperson. And you got to have transference for sales. So that's what you get with Linda Yaccarino. That's a snapshot. That is a snapshot of her. And you're going to get somebody who is really enthusiastic. And with Sagittarius, somebody who sees a big picture, right? So let's take a look at her chart with Elon. All right. So we know what Elon's chart is. He's a Cancer. He's in the center. Mars, true node, conjunction in Aquarius. 8th house. What do we see there? We see her Saturn. We see her Saturn almost right at the midpoint between his Mars and true node. So there's a couple things that I read about this. Number one is that I believe that he believes that she could get a lot done. That's number one. Number two, with his true node there, I think he probably recognizes that this is somebody that he could theoretically work with. So I don't necessarily think that here, do I think that BlackRock and Vanguard and Paul Singer, all these people who are on the board, presented choices to Elon? Yes, I do. He had to choose one. And this is the one he chose. And of course, there was an interview with her, and it's all public and shit like that. You know, one could make a case with her Saturn that Saturn is not just her, but Saturn represents the forces that represent her. So we can make a case for that. So she is probably going to have a lot more power than we might realize. I don't think she's a window dressing hire. Look where her Jupiter is. Her Jupiter and her moon are right on his midheaven. And she's got, you know, Jupiter in Aries. And we know that she's a Sag sign. She has Mercury also in Sag. So she's got this trine action going on. You can see the enthusiasm. Right? Again, this is fire. So she's got the moon in Leo, Jupiter in Leo, Sun, Mercury, looks like Mars in Sag. Man, she's got a ton of Sag. She doesn't have anything in Leo, but she's got a ton of fire. And you can just see, like, this is going to dominate his midheaven. So in the 8th house, there's Saturn. We have the Saturn-Mars conjunction. Like, I think there's an obligation here, but it's not one that he's going to be all that dissatisfied with. I think he understands that this woman represents a link to him in management, and also she's a professional, and I think he could probably go make us some money. And here, I think he's probably kind of swept up with her enthusiasm, and her Jupiter is right on his fucking midheaven, and her moon is right on his Chiron. Pretty much right there. And old Elon is going through his Chiron return. So Chiron's right about there. I also think that him hiring a woman, I think he believes, and if you look at women in his life, he's always, with the exception of his first wife, who I know very little about, except that she's some kind of, I don't know, bridge to being a breeder. But his mother plays a huge role in his life, right? Huge. And even for a brief period of time, little Grimes, who actually gave him a biological child, played a role. So women play a role in Elon's life, and especially important ones. And I would say that Linda Yaccarino, based on her astrology, is no exception, right? There's a reason why he hired this woman. Her sun in Sagittarius is right on his Neptune. So I think that she sees Elon Musk as somebody she can tap into. Right. And who knows, maybe with his Neptune, he could just kind of offload her and say, here, go do the everyday stuff that I don't want to do. Right. Because this is where her planets line up in his 6th house. So if she executes on his basic and fundamental agreements with the other people on the board, he can let her do that. Right. I think for him, this is a way for her to do the everyday things that he doesn't want to do. The challenge with her chart is I don't think it's going to stop there, And when you look at her idea and philosophy around marketing and advertising, is that they come from this very integrated approach. So, for instance, if Twitter, she's even said this, not in Twitter's terms, but if Twitter wants to sell more, let's say, electric vehicles, then that means that the ecosystem of Twitter has to reflect that sales partner. She's said this. She's on the record with this. So if you look at where everything is going in terms of the World Economic Forum and all these other things, right, that are, she comes out of, that these are going to be the products that she's going to be promoting, and they're going to be Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 friendly. Or so we think, right? Because we know of the existing technology that she could pimp out. We sort of know, we have kind of a map, right, where it's going. 15-minute cities, smart cities, 15-minute cities, smart wear, smart fabric, everything's fucking smart, right? But what if there are already technologies in place? And I think this is what, and again, I haven't watched Dark Journalist, so I don't know exactly what he covered with Grimes and Elon Musk and this whole story. But I think his thing is that there is this X technology that they have been sitting on for a while. And that if you look at Elon Musk and his whole thing with his first company, which was X.com and X Chat, that Elon Musk would be the technological gatekeeper for this technology. I think that's where ultimately this is going, right? Just so this brings us back to the Pluto and Aries and the robber barons, right? And the robber barons inherit, this is just my opinion, belief, idea around the robber barons. A lot of that stuff was already here. Like when you drill down into Tartaria world, you just see shit you can't unsee, okay? It's just a fact. You just see things you can't unsee. Like, why is that there? Why did they do this? How did they get all this electricity? Where did this shit come from? How did they have this back then, right? Once you go down that rabbit hole, you can't unsee it. So really what it comes down to is that the robber barons were the guys that basically had that shit and then turned it into the second industrial revolution and a much more kind of consumer oriented industrialized version of those products, whether it was electricity or whether it was cars, whatever it was, right? When you talk about the robber barons, that's exactly what they robbed. They robbed those original ideas, those original patents, those original technologies in and above the things that they were doing with extracting things like oil and gas. By the way, in favor of steam, right? Steam's a whole other topic of conversation and other way more technological and esoteric technological ideas that were floating around. I gotta have Analog on the show one of these days to talk about radium. When we have the radium talk, you guys, you'll have your fucking minds blown. I gotta have him on the Friday show one of these days. But that's what we're dealing with now, right? So there's this idea that the private sector is always 50 years behind what the military is doing, which I think there's some truth to that. So they're sitting on all this fucking mind-blowing technology, and we know they are. Like, they haven't done shit since this. That's it, right? They've given, and there's a lot here. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot, but they haven't done shit since that. So I think Musk is this guy who is going to be the guy that they're going to begin to introduce this technology to. And I think this is just paranoid me because I grew up in the 70s. I think there's strings attached. I don't think they're just going to roll this stuff out and all of a sudden, Gen Z is going to be able to take advantage of it, and they'll be able to pontificate on these like amazing multidimensional models of the universe. Although maybe that could be possibly true. I think there's strings attached. That's just my 2 cents. And then if you're going to want to have access to that technology, more than likely you're going to have to give something up. That's the game that's played. So where does Linda Yaccarino come into play? I think Elon Musk is clearly, with this chart, he's clearly on board with her. He's clearly on board with her. I didn't think they had to twist his arm at all. I think they probably gave him a couple of choices, maybe 3 or 4 choices. He connected with her, had a couple of interviews with her, and looking at this chart, this is his person. Look, her true node is right on his Mercury. Like, this is somebody I think he's going to feel safe around. He'll confide in her. And like with Jupiter and the moon up here, especially Jupiter, it's like she'll get the vision, she'll expand on the vision. He is completely in alignment. Nobody had to twist his arm with this woman. Yeah, there's some oppositional stuff. Mars, Venus opposition, but she's got that Venus Mars conjunction. What do we know about Venus Mars conjunction? She can go femme, she can go male. Like, this is a woman who could hang out with soccer moms, right? And then she could fucking drink with the dudes with this Venus Mars conjunction. Totally. Her Pluto is in his 3rd house. I think he probably likes that. Moon Uranus conjunction. She probably understands some of the tech stuff. Yeah, most of this is based on the oppositional, is that her Neptune is square his Mars. How would that work out? Let me think about that. Here's what I think. I think that because Elon Musk does have this interesting relationship with powerful women in his life, especially his mother, Linda Yaccarino is definitely older. I think that the Mars-Neptune square could result in him having his theoretical power dissipated with the Mars-Neptune square. And that gets into Saturn. And she's got a Saturn-Neptune square, which is riding on top of his Mars-Neptune square. So it's interesting because when Sagittarians become business people, they really have to believe in what they do. Really have to believe in it. If they don't believe in it, they're not going to be successful. And I think at the heart of this Saturn-Neptune square in her chart, it's going to do one of 2 things. Elon is either going to make her more aware of kind of the unfair playing field of the game in some ways, right? I think that could happen. And as a result of that, he might wind up, I don't want to use the word usurping her power, but almost like, how the Borg could take over and take the characteristics of somebody on. Like, he could do that with her, with that Mars. If she's not aware, fully aware, I think he could do that. And she's going to run into a character with Musk who's very different than anybody she's dealt with before. I think that that's part of, but the other side of this could be true as well. And that Musk might have to defer to her with that Mars Saturn conjunction. And as a result, have that Mars bled out. And it's funny, we were watching Dr. Strangelove last night, and how Sterling Hayden's character talks about his fluids, right? His vital fluids, and how fluoride leaches out his vital fluids. I think there could be some of that, but again, it would be more along the lines of him deferring too much to her. That's the one area of this that I think could be a bit problematic. But she's in it too. This behind the scenes and money and the flexing of his will as it relates to her authority is going to be I think the rubber hits the road of this relationship. But don't think that he's not involved in this. And he likes this person. I can tell. I can totally see this. And he's in. He's totally in. So better get used to her. Better get used to her. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. And his Saturn opposes her sun. I think she is somebody who would be open to a fair challenge, actually. And Elon Musk will present that to her from time to time, right? With his Saturn sitting over her sun, not in a conjunction sense, but in this oppositional sense, like, come over here and join me, right? Come over here. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see who Linda Yaccarino is by the time all of this is done. She may not be the same person. Just saying. All right. There you go. I wanted to talk a little bit about the border crisis. Where are we? It's 9:30. We started what, 6:30? Let's see. Why don't we do this? I wanted to get into Fiona Apple's chart too. Why don't we table the border stuff until next week? And I'm going to look at Fiona Apple's chart next week too, because it'll give us something to talk about. Oh, that'll be probably an hour number 2, because I have a guest next week who's going to be great, totally great. Why don't we table the border stuff in Fiona Apple till next week? And I'll be able to put some more border stuff together, because I have an idea, an astrological kind of model for this border thing. All right, why don't we stop here? It's pretty late. It's 10:30 on the East Coast. All right. I did not mention my sponsor, which I always need to do. So why don't we do that? Let's talk True Hemp Science. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see who Linda Yaccarino is by the time Elon's done with this whole thing with her. All right, so let's get into this. True Hemp Science, great sponsor of the show. I'm always happy and proud to talk about this business on all my shows. Chris is a purveyor, some of the finest CBD you'll find. And all you got to do is spend $100 and type in 15 mins. That's 15 MINS. 15 MINS. And you'll get free product when you check out. And there's so much good stuff inside of here. And you can still vote for him for the best CBD purveyor in Austin. So even if you don't buy anything, do our friend Chris a favor and click on that and give him a little love, give him a little vote. Let's see if we can make him the best CBD purveyor in Austin. If you spend $150 or more, you get free shipping, and there's always a 30-day guarantee, right? 30-day money back guarantee. So if you have any issues with the CBD, just, send it back in 30 days and Chris will refund you. Okay. All right. K. Here we go. Do a little Bill Hicks there. And then there's me. You can always get a reading with me. If you like what you hear, go to robertphoenix.com, my website, under services. You can purchase a reading, follow the instructions. Pretty simple. All you got to do is call me, and there's a number there. That's just, and you can call from Skype, or I think you can use Telegram. Although, man, I haven't been to Telegram in a while. I go to Signal more. So if you have Signal, you can reach me through Signal as well. I guess people outside of the U.S. don't have Signal, do they? Am I right about that? No, that's not true. My buddy Paul texts me through Signal. All right. That's it. We'll be back next week. We'll talk about astrology and the Ark of the Covenant and cool shit you probably haven't heard of, right? You'll see that next week. We'll get into the migrant stuff, right? And then I got to go back to the Fiona Apple's chart. It's a great chart, and some really interesting astrological lessons in there. That's it. Thanks for being here. Mods, thank you very much. Chattaria, you're the best. Use your head in order to discern what's real. Your heart to say what's possible. And we're just for just a minute, right? Just a minute. Wrap your head and heart around the fact that we are going to get through this time. We're going to get through it. Okay? We're going to get through this time. And there's going to be a moment. It's coming. There's going to be a moment. It's going to be a big moment. And when that moment comes, we already had a dress rehearsal. It was with COVID. It was our dress rehearsal. When the moment comes, you'll know it. And you're either all in or all out at that moment. And when it's all in, there's no hesitation. And there's no looking back. It's coming. Stay aware. Stay awake. Stay open. That's it.